Yes, good evening and welcome to Dermot and Philip's Political Podcast. And yes, we're starting a new series on Ireland, the greatest country in the world, where we're going to go through its history. Welcome, we're starting tonight from the Island Rising from 1916 to 21, looking back at one of the most important and dramatic periods in Irish history. From the Easter Rising of 1916 to the War of Independence to the Civil War, that events that shaped the future of this country. This is a time of rebellion, sacrifice, political change, and growing calls for Irish freedom. In this series, we'll be exploring the key moments, the leading figures, the struggles, the victories, the divisions that helped transform Ireland from a country that was under British rule to the country we know and love today in Irish freedom. We look now at the failed rising in Dublin. But what it did spark, let me phrase that again, We look at how the failed rising in Dublin became the spark for national movement, how public opinion changed, how Sinn Féin rose to prominence, and how conflict spread across the country in the fight for independence. This is the story of national in turmoil, a people determined of change, and a period that would have left a lasting mark in Irish history forever. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast. Joining me, of course, is my usual two co-hosts. Philip comes with no introduction, was around in the 1916 Rising. He was actually running the GPO as the bank manager at the time. And he was a bit pissed off because he had to go home early that day. He did go up to Podrick Pierce and give him a bit of a rollicking. But Philip being Philip, as we know, a bit of, he's a rebellion at heart, decided to take up the arms and fight the British Empire. Had the crack with Michael Collins as well. And he's here to live the tale. I mean, Philip, dramatic times, but why are you pissed off? You're getting a day off.
No, not too bad. Actually, we got a week off afterwards. It was fine, Yeah.
Wasn't it a bank holiday?
It was Easter Sunday.
Yeah, Easter Monday.
Yeah, we were off Easter Monday.
We
were supposed to go back on Tuesday, but trouble is, we're no building to go back to afterwards. So, we had to relocate.
You spoke to Mick Collins as well. You give him his advice what to do later. I mean, it's all down to you, really, Philip, isn't it, to be honest?
Yeah, I told him to avoid trips down to Kerry in about 5 years' time,
Okay. And down below is a man, a world-renowned journalist. No, he wasn't around back in them days reporting on it. He wasn't even a twinkle in it. He wasn't a twinkle in his daddy's eye his granddaddy's eye back then. A famous author as well, a sir. He's knighted in France. And it is Ronan McGeevy. Ronan, how are you? Welcome back. It's always a joy to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you so much, Dermot and Philip, for having me.
That's great. Now, Philip, look, Ireland, I just want to start before we get into the notes about boats and about Irish and the turbulent times that took us to the 16 Rising, and we had the lockout before. But what does Ireland mean to you?
What does Ireland mean to me? Yeah, I'm a kind of strange case to ask that question too, because I was actually born in Northern Ireland, but from both my parents were sort of from the Republic of Ireland, but from Ireland, south of Ireland. So I for the first 7 years of my life, I was looking at it from the outside looking in. I didn't really know much about it. Then the family moved to England for 10 years, and it's when I came back that I really began to identify with the country, and it means everything, really. I've got kids, I've got grandkids now that are proud Irish people. I've got a son-in-law that represented Ireland in the Olympics. So that's what, that's what it means to me. And every day it does. And that's why I'm delighted to do this series, which will bring people that might not be aware of what actually happened to bring Ireland the way it is now, and starting 110 years ago.
Yeah, before I get to you, Ronan, Ireland means to me, look, my parents are Irish. I was adopted as a young baby, brought up, of course, in England. But I've always thought myself as Irish. I've never considered myself as English. Though my accent does, people would think when they hear me, oh, he's from England. Yes, I did live there, but I've never considered myself English. I've always considered myself Irish. A father from Mayo, from the west of Ireland, a mother from Armagh in Northern Ireland as well, my adopted parents, and my birth parents from Wicklow and Cork. So Ireland's in me, and I'm proud of this country. I'm a proud Irishman. I suppose if you cut my veins, Ireland will come out of me. And it's a country, I think it's the greatest country in the world. I don't think there's no better country than here. Yes, we have our issues. Yes, we have our hiccups, but I think we do it in the right way here. And we also fight for our freedom. And I think that's the most important thing. You look at other countries, we can identify with other countries struggling that are looking for their independence. We've not one come out of that, and look how we've performed. So I think pride would be the one I would use. Ronan, what does Ireland mean to you?
It means only one thing, one word: home. That's it. I mean, it's the one place, no matter where I go in the world, I always feel at home. And I lived in England for 9 years, so I have a greater appreciation of the place. Like yourself, I wouldn't go so far as to say it was the greatest country in the world, but it's the greatest country in the world as far as I'm concerned, because I live here and it's my home. And so that's it, really. Home.
Yeah, I would agree that it is to me, it's the greatest country in the world. And I do know we may have our issues, but Ireland is, I just think we're the greatest people. And when we go away, like with the soccer, with the athletics, you look at Birmingham, the crowds of Irish over in Birmingham, you look when people follow the soccer team, there's never any issue. We go away, we'll have a drink, have a good time. Like Philip doing his sheep noises in Russia, I saw Philip's fault. He started that back in Italian 90. I reckon that was Philip doing that in the pen somewhere. But let's roll all the way back to the start of the last century, 1900. Philip, Ireland was under British rule, has been for a while now, and for 700 years, we were under the thumb of British rule. Many rebellions come, many rebellions went. Nothing really took hold, did it, until the start of the last century?
Yeah.
What do you think sparked it? And it really was the lock-in, wasn't it? That really sparked what happened 4 years later or 3 years later, wasn't it?
Well, I think it was building. Obviously, the lockout was the end result of very unfair work practices. There was no unions were allowed. The companies would not allow, the bosses would not allow unions. Poor working conditions, no rights really. There was no sort of workplace ethics that you got sick pay or anything like that if you're out sick. There's nothing like that. And that's what caused it. The likes of James Connolly and James Larkin saw the injustices that were being done and held public meetings, put the word around that something had to be done. And it ended up in August 1913, I think, that there was kind of a general strike, and which lasted, correct me if I'm wrong, lasted until January the following year. Yeah. And during that time, nobody worked. Nobody got paid. How they quite survived, I don't know, because there was no social welfare. And while it was a defining moment for the country into what happened after that, it must have been dreadfully hard on the families and the relations of the people that were on strike, because there was just no money coming in and no means of support at all. So they were brilliant to keep it going for that long. And I believe that once it finished, there were some gains, some things were granted. It was very bad for the ITGWU, because they kind of came out badly out of that, as far as I can remember. So Ronan, you'd probably be able to confirm that. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you want to go back, let's go back to the beginning. We'll go back further than that to 1900, right? So this is the time after the Parnell split in the Irish Home Rule movement. Parnell dies in 1891. And the years between 1900 and 1912 are some of the quietest years we've ever had in Irish history. There's nothing in the way of violent agitation. What there is on the part of the British is a certain, what they call, killing home rule with kindness, whereby a series of progressive legislation was actually brought in, including the Wyndham Act of 1903, which was a massive act transferring a lot of the land owned by the big estates to ordinary tenants in Ireland. And then you had the Labourers Act of 1908, which was building lots of colleges for people. So actually the years between 1900 and 1912 were actually pretty good years for Ireland in general. And but what happened is in 1910, there was a British general election. It was 2 in 1 year, and then the Home Rule Party held the balance of power. So in 1912, they insisted with the Liberal government of driving through the Home Rule Bill of 1912, and there was also a transformation, and there would be a House of Lords in the House of Commons, that the House of Lords can no longer block legislation except for 3 years. So it's passed in 1912, so the clock is ticking, It's going to be, it's a three parliament, so it's going to be enacted in 1914, and this is going to give home rule, which is a form of devolution. It is not independence. Please, nobody think that it's independent. It is not, to Ireland, and this is the catalyst that causes everything that happens after this, which is the rise of the UVF, the rise of the Irish Volunteers, the Irish Citizen Army, which arises out of the lockout, 1916 Rising, and so on.
Very good.
Yeah. And I mean, Ronan, look, if you do look back them quiet years, it was 1800, wasn't it, when the Act of the Act of the Union came in?
Yes.
And of course, there was the rebellion in the 1800s as well, wasn't there? So there was
failed
rebellions.
There was three, but they were all one day. They were all minor affairs. So there was the one with Emmet in 1803, and then you had the skirmish in Widow McCormick's cabbage patch in 1848, and then you had the more serious Fenian Rebellion in 1867. But the thing about the Fenian Rebellion is that because it failed as badly as it did, the physical force republicanism took a backseat to constitutional nationalism for right up until 1916, essentially, and it was at this stage that the Home Rule Party under Parnell becomes this very formidable force in the House of Commons. It holds the balance of power on two occasions, 1886 and 1893. There are two Home Rule bills. The first one fails in the House of Commons in 1886. The second one in 1893 is passed by the Parliament, passed by the elected representatives, but it fails in the House of Lords. So this is the third time. In 1912, this is third time lucky for the Home Rule Party under John Redmond. They have the balance of power in the House of Commons, and this time the veto of the House of Lords is reduced to 3 years. So this is going to go through. Ireland is going to have control of its own affairs and internal affairs, but obviously it's still going to be part of the United Kingdom. It won't have a separate navy or army or whatever. It's very similar to what Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland has today. That was on the offer to Ireland in 1912. Now, it should be said as well that physical force republicanism before the First World War was basically dead, right? There was nothing in the way of an armed militia in Ireland at that stage. Sinn Féin, which had been established by Arthur Griffith in 1905 to set up an independent Irish state, was nowhere, right? So it was regarded as a fringe organisation. All the hopes and expectations of Irish people was poured into the Home Rule Bill. So at that stage, the idea of Irish independence was a minority pursuit, regarded in some ways as the sort of bailiwick of extremists. So that was the situation before 1912.
And then, of course, we had the lockout, and then the First World War started. Now, there was a sign, wasn't it? I can't remember what the saying was, Philip, but wasn't it a problem for England was something...
Sorry, the King or Kaiser?
No, it was... I forget what it was.
England's problem is Ireland's opportunity, or
That's it. That was it. Yeah, that was it. And that sort of set the sail, didn't it, for what happened in 16? Now we had the emergence of GAA getting involved, going around, starting to speak the Irish language again. There was I think Irish dancing. There was Gaelic sport as well, was starting to be played around the country. There was little bits of. There was Podrick Pearse doing his speeches, and others as well. Do you know how? And also, I think if I'm right, people started coming back from America, and then they Philip back to Ireland to get involved in the IRB. Michael Collins had been inducted into the IRB in England, in North London, in Finsbury, I think, in Finsbury Park, or around that area in London. He worked in the post office. Sam Maguire, of course, the cup that the Gaelic football trophy is called after, he was already in the IRB as well. So a lot of recruitment's been done in England from the Irish in England. How important was it the IRB got everything in their ducks in a row for what was to come up, because there was a bit of divide how to do this, wasn't there, back in them days?
Well, the only thing, on a sort of side issue to that, the things started moving after the strike finished, but a lot of people were affected by the strike, I call it the strike, it's the lockout. I think like every lockout or like every strike, there was strike breakers. There was workers that went to work for maybe under the counter payments or whatever, to keep things going in a certain way. But I think the retribution against them came in 1914 when those guys were blacklisted and couldn't get work anywhere. And what did they do? They joined the British Army. And where did they end up? In Flanders, getting slaughtered on behalf of the king. So that was kind of a downside. The people that would have, I think Ireland was pretty badly affected by the First World War, especially. And if I'm right, Roland, I think whenever the Rising did take place in 1916, that it was generally very unpopular.
Yeah,
with the Dublin people until the executions took place. And that was probably the worst. That was probably the worst thing the British could have done. Is they incited, or they got the people on the side of the actual insurgents at that stage.
But I suppose when we go back to the Easter Rising, the critical question is, why did the Easter Rising take place when it took place at Easter 1916? And the answer to that question is the First World War. Now, the First World War is a seminal event in Irish history. It is the catalyst for everything else that happens. Before the First World War, there's a foundation of the Ulster Volunteer Force to oppose Home Rule, and then you have the Irish Volunteers, which is set up almost like as a counterweight to the Ulster Volunteer Force. That's set up in early 1914. So when the First World War breaks out in 1914, talks have broken down in Buckingham Palace between John Redmond and James Craig and Lord Carson, Edward Carson, over what's going to happen. The Unionists want an opt-out for the 9 counties of Ulster or the 6 counties, depending on which way you look at it. Obviously John Redmond will not agree to this. He will agree to a temporary reprieve, but of course the Ulster Unionists won't agree to that because they think it's just a stay of execution. So this issue is not resolved in July 1914, and there is a real fear in the British government this is going to be a civil war and it's going to split the British Army as well. And then, in the nick of time, or the First World War breaks out, and in fact, on the day that it breaks out, Edward Grey, the Foreign Secretary, said, the one bright spark we have in all of this is Ireland. We're not going to have a civil war in Ireland. That's basically what he states. Now, fast forward to 1916. At that stage, the war is going on for nearly 2 years. Now, it was an article of faith among extreme nationalists, right? All of them are rebels, that the only chance of an Ireland ever winning having a successful rebellion against the British was during wartime, because then the British would have to divert resources from wherever. And of course, there was no opportunity in the 19th century after the Fenian Rebellion until 1914. And that is when the IRB, a secret agency within the IRB, led by Pearse and Clark and Plunkett, Clark and Sean McDermott and who's the other guy? Pearse. They set up this secret IRB section with the Irish Republican Brotherhood to plan a rebellion. But the whole idea of the rebellion is that it's going to happen while the British are at war, because that's the only chance that the Irish have of actually succeeding. So that's why the Easter Rising breaks out when it does in 1916. Now, just one last thing to go back to the Irish Citizens' Army. The Irish Citizens' Army is founded by James Connolly and what's his name? James Larkin in 1917 as a kind of a working class militia. You would have those in those days. And there was a big fear among the IRB that the Irish Citizens' Army was going to rise up no matter what happened, and was going to ruin their plans for the Easter Rising. So basically, a couple of weeks before the Rising, they co-opted or nearly kidnapped James Connolly and brought them into their plans. So the IRB would take part in the Rising with the IRB. The Citizens' Army would take part in the Rising with the IRB. So that's how Connolly and Pearse, they're mentioned in the same breath all the time, but they're actually from completely different ideological sides of the spectrum, right? God knows how they would have got on with each other had they both lived. But that's the background to the Rising.
And also, the rise in Owen McNeill, because that weekend, wasn't it? Everyone was supposed to rise up.
Yeah.
And Owen McNeill then put an ad or puts something in the paper saying that his part of it should not rise. They are to stand down. They are not to meet on the Monday, and that causes problems as well for the signatories of the publication and the people that are behind the Rising. What do we do? Do we rise now? Do we not rise? Do we put this off? And a decision was taken, wasn't it, Ronan? We're going to rise. We're going to do it tomorrow. The hell with it. We're going to do. The rest of Ireland will rise with us. Well, the rest of Ireland didn't rise with.
Yeah, because of McNeill, right? I mean, so McNeill was kept in the dark of, even though he was the titular head of the Irish Volunteers, he was kept in the dark about the Rising until it was nearly too late. And when he was informed about it, he was also informed about the fact that the Odd, which was carrying Roger Casement, which had a very considerable arsenal of about 25,000 rifles plus thousands of rounds of ammunition and shells and all the rest, had been intercepted by the Royal Navy and was being scuppered. And he knew that there was no chance of this rising succeeding from a military point of view. And so therefore he puts the countermanding order into the Sunday Independent on the Sunday morning, and this creates a huge amount of confusion. Most of the battalions of the Irish Volunteers outside Dublin don't rise. So you're left with the ones in Dublin, and as far as Clark and McDermott and Pearse were concerned, if they didn't do it then, they would never do it, and they were kind of resigned to defeat in advance. They knew it would probably not succeed, but they felt it was worth doing anyway, to basically as a sort of, well, if as a way of getting the Irish public to consider complete independence from Britain as opposed to just home rule.
Yeah, and Philip, it did light the blue touch paper in a way. As you said later on, once the execution started happening, then public opinion then started to turn. But it did start, Philip, on the 24th of April. It ran on to the 29th of April 1916. Now, Dublin rose, but there were skirmishes in Meath, Galway, Louth, Wexford, and then it's Gawdy, actually. They rose up not far from me, and Cork as well, Philip. So the whole country didn't rise up. Why do you think that was back then, Philip? Do you think there was a lot of people were thinking, we're happy with our lives, we're happy how the country's being run, we don't want independence? Or do you think it was all about information out there? Or what do you think, Philip, was behind the country not rising, but only a few counties did?
I would say a lot of them must have been reading the Sunday Independent that weekend, because they would have seen the message that things weren't going to go ahead, and it would have caused. I mean, that would cause confusion today in the mega information-driven world that we have. So that was, and you're sitting down in the country. You probably need to buy the paper once a week. Oh, hold on, this thing's cancelled. Let's go and have a Easter egg. So that's probably what happened. Dublin was different because that's where most of the action was due to take place anyway. It was much easier to get word around that this thing was going to happen. And that's why it did happen, and possibly not on as big a scale as maybe had been planned. I'm not too sure about that. I'm sure it was the GPO and Boland's Mills were the two big occupational things at that time, and the GPO obviously that's the one that gets most of the attention. But am I right in saying that De Valera was in Boland's Mills? That was it?
Yes, he was. Yeah. Well, I mean, they had serious plans for the Rising. I mean, it's very easy to dismiss what they're doing as sort of quixotic and self-sacrificing. In fact, they had potentially 25,000 men, and with all those rifles as well. The idea was that they were going to hold the line of the Shannon, and that they were going to retreat behind the Shannon. And you might think, well, they're never going to defeat the British. But the British at this stage are stretched to the limit. They're preparing for the Battle of the Somme. Yeah. They are completely engaged in the war in France. They do not have a huge number of troops to man Ireland, and you could see what happened with the IRA during the War of Independence, that they were able to basically bring the British to a standstill within 2.5 years. So, I mean, had the odd, there's all this supposition, had the odd landed and had McNeill not made the countermanding order, the history of Ireland could have been very different. They really could. I'm not saying they would have won, but they may not have lost. They didn't have to win. They just had not to lose. And
I just want to bring up a picture here, Ronan, just very quickly. Okay, it's come up the wrong way. I will get it the right way around. Sorry, I brought it on the wrong part. Where is it now? Just a picture of the different locations in Dublin where they were, because it wasn't just the GPR. I think there was 5 or 6 different locations. So this is a map here. People, this is the map of what we're showing now of the locations where the IRA, the IRB as it was called then, the IRA, I think didn't come in to just before the War of Independence. It was the Irish Republican Brotherhood. So these are the different places. So if you can explain to the people why these places are so significant with the Easter Rising.
Yeah, well, the GPO is obviously the sort of central communication, and one of the reasons why that was occupied was, first of all, it wasn't as heavily guarded, say, for instance, as Dublin Castle was, which was the central British rule in Ireland, and also had a radio in its for transmission to the rest of the world. But it was a silly decision in a lot of ways, because you're basically a sitting duck within the GPO. The other locations make more sense. Of course, the South Dublin Union is where St James's Hospital is now. That was controlled the main exit out of Dublin at that stage. So that one makes sense. And you could also argue the same for the forecourts. This was to stop troops arriving from the Phoenix Park, from coming through the Phoenix Park to Dublin. The Jacobs factory, I'm trying to remember the reasons for this, and the College of Surgeons. The one place that they were not able to take was Dublin Castle. Dublin Castle was obviously the centre of British rule in Ireland, but for some reason that was handed to the Irish Citizen Army to do, but they made a very bad job of it, and so I ended up in St Stephen's Green, where again they occupied the College of Surgeons in St Stephen's Green, they actually occupied they dug trenches in St Stephen's Green, and of course that was a silly decision as well, because they were simply shelled on from places like the Shelbourne Hotel and elsewhere. Then they retreated to the College of Surgeons. The place where they had most success, as you can see down here on the right, is Northumberland Road and Boland's factory. Now, on Northumberland Road, the just 2 men ambushed the I think it was the Sherwood Foresters as they were coming in from Kingstown, and inflicted terrible casualties on the British, actually. And that was an outpost of Boland's factory as well. But Boland's factory was not particularly active either. So, I mean, it's a very, as military plans go, it wasn't great at all, you know. And they were overrun within 5 days. But 5 days is still, 6 days. 6 days is still 5 days longer than previous rebellions, you know.
It is, and just to let people, Kingstown is actually Dunleary, so that's where right. That was where it was called, and Cove. What was it again?
Kingsbridge is now.
No, Cove was.
No, Kingsbridge. Yeah, Cove was Queenstown.
Queenstown.
That was it. There is Houston Station.
Yeah. So just to let you know, and also that day, Philip, the soldiers weren't in Dublin, were they? They were in Fairyhouse watching the racing. So they're enjoying themselves, having a great day at the races, having a few bets, spending time with their missus or whatever, their girlfriends or whoever. Having the high society. Philip would have been there as well as a bankman trying to drum up business for his bank. Like, you know, Philip had his own tent. It was called Brady's Banks Associations. Come and we'll give you money. But then they get they get the call to get back to Dublin. The GPO's been taken over. And didn't the IRB then started blowing up bridges coming back into Dublin? So it distributed, because there was a great train network. So all the train networks were stopped and that. So they did well for a day or so, and then the British brought a ship up the Liffey,
the
started
Helga.
bombing the hell out of the GPO. Then they moved to Moore Street, which is very significant because even if you walk down Moore Street now, sorry, let me take that off. If you walk down Moore Street now, you can still see the bullets in the wall, even outside the GPO. You can if you go down Moore Street, and that's where they knocked walls out so they could walk through the different houses because they were all connected. And that is where Podrick Pierce surrendered. Now, we know James Connolly was injured. We know, the casualties, of course, then was, where was it now?
It's nearly
Was
500,
casualties. Yeah, 82 killed, 16 executed, 143 wounded, and 143 killed and 397 wounded. Now, that was just from the British Army and the IRB, not civilians. So there would be a lot more when they're running on top of that.
So I think there is an accurate figure. It's about 495 people were killed that week. Yeah.
But on that, Philip, look, if you were around that day and you're going to the GPO, you're getting your pension or whatever from the army, whatever, wouldn't you be a bit miffed having some fella come out and said, right, we're taking over here? And there was a lot of resentment, wasn't there, Philip, towards what was happening?
Like, I know I'm going to answer that question now in a second, but I'm just going back to the GPO presently today. There is a fantastic museum exhibition underneath the GPO.
I've seen it.
Which is well worth going to see. It explains a lot of what we're talking about in great detail. It's very, very good. But as regards to the inconvenience that it caused, I mean, in the film Michael Collins, you can see some Dublin housewife coming and throwing something at the guys as they've been led away from the GPO. You know, they were that kind of showed that Dublin was not enamored with what had happened. That came later, after the biggest mistake the Brits probably ever made by executing James Connolly and his risers. But yeah, it wasn't popular. Like, I'm not sure how it went down the country, because, you know, there was no instant communications in those days. Very few people had radios, if there was radios at all. And it probably took a couple of days, maybe the time the paper came out the next morning. And even then, if
there wasn't any newspapers in some of the days during the Easter Rising as well, you know, because in fact the Irish Independent and the Irish Times were both bombed by, they're both shelled by the Helga, accidentally, as it turns out, you know. But I think the Irish Times was on Talbot Street, and I think the Independent was on Middle Abbey Street, where it was for many, many years. So they were both substantially damaged. Now, I think there was quite a few days during that week newspapers didn't come out, so things got really garbled. I mean, you have to remember this was a time when there wasn't the instant communication there is now. So, you know, that may be one of the reasons why the rest of the country didn't rise as well, because they weren't getting the necessary information. Yeah.
But then the worm turned then after the summary trials and guilty verdicts on the leaders of the rising. And then once the execution started taking place, things really turned to the other direction. The ire was directed at the British aristocracy. In fact, I believe too, this is the truth, that any Irish guys in the British Army who happened to be home on leave at the time, I think they were actually subjected to a lot of abuse as well, because they would claim to be an arm of what was just after happening to their Irish compatriots. So I don't know whether that's accurate or not now. But.
Well, it is. Well, I mean, the thing is that for an awful lot of them, and, you know, you have this documented very well by the likes of Francis Ledwidge and Tom Kettle, you know, they realise now that they're probably on the wrong side of history, because the execution of the leaders of the rising really has a very big emotional effect on people in Ireland at that stage. I mean, people would have been ambivalent enough about the rising, but when this comes through, you know, I mean, the purpose of the rising really, once it was realised that it wasn't going to succeed militarily, was to wake the Irish people up. And this was said in advance. It wasn't said as a retrospective justification for it. As Sean McDermott says, if nobody else is prepared to sacrifice their lives for Irish freedom, we do it ourselves. And he really meant that, because he obviously did. And the idea was I don't know who was involved, and it's so true. The Easter Rising was an act of desperation because a lot of advanced nationalists like Pierce and Connolly and these guys had seen how people had become so used to, British rule in Ireland that it was becoming far too benign for their liking, and also the fact that so many of them signed up to join the First World War. They thought, if we don't do this now, we're going to lose the soul of this country forever. I mean, they said that in advance, and I think they succeeded in that regard, because otherwise, had the Easter Rising not have happened, some form of home rule would have happened after the war, and we might still not be an independent country, no matter what anybody tells you to the contrary.
Was it a case of like hammer taking a hammer to an egg?
Yeah. I mean, they shouldn't have been executed, but the reason they were executed, and this is important, and again, we've got to frame the Easter Rising in the context of the First World War. Obviously, the rebels asked for help from their gallant allies. Obviously, casement went to Germany to get men and to get munitions. So they were executed, not because of staging a rising, but because of aiding and giving succor to the enemy of His Majesty's realm in wartime, right? And that's important, because in the 1867 rebellion, there was nobody executed. Not a single one. There might have been one, but that was a special case. They did not want to make martyrs of them. But what they did is they did this as a judicial, a military court, presided over by John Maxwell. Herbert Asquith, the Prime Minister, washed his hands of it, and by the time he realised that this was wrong, it was too late.
But do you not think...
And of course, sorry, Philip. No, and of course, Dev was one of them who later on in this series will become very... a figure of backstabbing proportions, in my view, but maybe in different people's view. But there was always about him setting up Michael Collins for the treaty. He knew what he couldn't get. He said, Michael Collins has been back the bad news. We are going to get over that. But he was saved because he was born in America. Right. So that saved his side. And back then they was stopping anyway. But I want to move forward to 1918. The general election, where I think it was still in people's minds, wasn't it? The Easter Rising. It's 2 years on. People are starting to think about it, and the War of Independence hadn't started yet, Philip. But the war had just finished. The people that were put into prisons in the UK returned home to euphoric cheering and wave flagging, and everyone's welcome home. Michael Collins, of course, did a lot of work in the camps in Wales as well, gathering information. And the bigger problem, wasn't it? It was about all these rebellions failed because of informants and people spying and information going back to Dublin Castle, going back for the G-men to come out and stop all these rebellions. So Mick Collins' first job was, right, we're going to have to make myself a bigger network so I get the spies and I get the information. And he really was, wasn't he, Philip? He was the starter of this. He started the guerrilla warfare, but the way he went about it laid the foundations really for the success of the War of Independence in a way, didn't it?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what also started to lay probably a big mistake by the British is that after the Easter Rising, when they jailed all the guys that had been arrested in camps in Wales, right, which was basically became a training camp for what happened next. That's where they Michael Collins and the like trained all the guys in guerrilla tactics, how to organize a revolution, basically. So when they came back after their sentence was finished, it was more or less pretty inevitable that they would carry that training into practice, and that's where the War of Independence came from. And the guys were much better trained when they came back than they were when they left.
Yeah.
So just a question to you, Ronan. I've got one question for you. On the general election of 1918, we know, I've got the seats here that were won, so let me find it. Sorry, I do apologise. I thought I had this. Sorry, where is it?
If
you know them, Ronan, then say it.
Yeah, I think
them. Oh, here we go. Here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the 1918 December 1918 general election. It's known as the khaki election. It's the election that's held a month after the armistice of November 1918. And in this election, Sinn Féin wipes out, which is the separatist party, and has stood on the platform of an independent republic for Ireland. Wipes out the old Irish Parliamentary Party, which had been the mainstay of Irish rule for Irish representation in Parliament for decades, for 50 years before. And obviously the Unionists get 22 seats. I think there's a vast majority of them in the north, apart from a couple of seats in Trinity College and then one in Rathmines Township or something like that. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is that the Sinn Féin wins an overwhelming majority of Irish votes and seats on the basis of a separatist platform that they wanted to get rid of the British. Now, what they were going to replace them with was not quite clear in their manifesto, but they said that they would use any means to get rid of the British. And of course, they did it on a separatist platform. They set up the first Dáil on the 21st of January 1918, and all of these TDs who were elected to the British Parliament were actually, they were de facto the members of the first Dáil. So that was the beginning of Irish independence. And on the same day, and it's entirely coincidentally, you have the Solohead Beg ambush, which is the first shots really of the War of Independence. Although we look at it backwards as the start of the War of Independence, at that time it was seen as an isolated incident. But certainly that day, in the 21st of January 1919, is a very, very significant day in Irish history.
It is, and it was done in Cork, wasn't it? In West Cork.
Tipperary, Solohead Beg.
In Tipperary, yeah. But I think there was a separate one that goes under the radar, I think in Cork as well. But I don't know why Cork's in my head. Mate, you are right, Ronan. I'm probably wrong. But am I right to say, Ronan, Mick Collins didn't give the go-ahead for that?
For Solohead Beg. Well, Mick Collins wouldn't have been ahead of the IRA at that stage. I think it was Dick Mulcahy. This was a totally freelance operation, right? So when we talk about, you talked there about the War of Independence, and you say it's from the 21st of January 1990 to 11. Yes, those are the dates, but it's really only a series of isolated incidents until early 1920. Then the IRA has been reserving its strength, starts burning RIC barracks all over the country. And that's the real start of the War of Independence. But certainly, the first violent acts of the War of Independence is the Solohead Beg. Yeah.
Philip, we know the film Michael Collins, starring Liam Neeson, and it sort of romances him really as a romance figure, which back in them days he was sort of that romancing figure, wasn't he? To a lot of other people. He was a hero to the Irish. He was a romance, or the women wanted to be with him, or the men wanted to be him, sort of thing. So he had that sort of...
A bit like Philip there, yeah.
A bit like Philip back in the day, right. Yeah. I could see all the men wanted to be him, and he was a bit like James Bond back in the day. Philip,
right.
I could see you a bit of Sean Connery in you and Pierce Brosnan in you, like. I can see that now. I'm going to die for this. You know this. After this, he's going to ring me up and eat my ear off. You do realise that?
No. I'll give you a day or two to relax, then I'll do it.
Thank you. More Horse's Head. Lovely. I look forward to the next one. But what was I going to say now? I really was going to go on to what was I going to say?
So I think what we should do is perhaps... we can wrap it up fairly soon this time around, because we can get on to the War.
And there's one point I want to talk about, and that maybe Ronan, you know about this, was the financing of the Irish government, of the at that time illegal Irish government. Yeah. And of course he set up a bond, didn't he? And and they raised £500,000 in Ireland with people signing up to it. Dev was in America at this time, raised another load of money. So nearly £1 million had been raised for the fledgling government. Right, and the British sent over somebody to investigate where all the money was going to.
And he was shot.
And he was taken off a tram in Dublin and shot.
That's right.
And that ended the investigation there and then. How calculated, and we will finish here, so I think it's a good point to finish, but how calculated was that from Collins? And you as well, Philip, you can answer this as well. Go to Patrick.
You're talking about
How calculated was that for him to do it there and then, like this is stuff? How did that help him in future decisions that he made?
Well, he was a brilliant man, but you see, the thing about Collins, you have to remember, and there's a very good book on this very subject by a friend of mine called Patrick O'Sullivan Keefe, called Crowdfunding the Revolution. And essentially what he said is basically, in order to demonstrate their seriousness, they needed to not only set up the counter-state, but they also needed to fund it. And De Valera spent most of the War of Independence in America raising funds, but at home there was a very successful bond drive as well. And of course, the British were trying to get their hands on that type of money. And that's when Collins intervened to take the guy off the tram, whose name escapes me just at the moment, but I can tell it to you in a few minutes. But he was the guy who was supposed to be investigating the money. And they actually, there's a house in number 6 Harcourt Street. That's where all the money was kept. And that was raided a few times, but in essence, it was a brilliant measure, and he was able to pay, civil servants and pay for the dole and pay for propaganda, which is a very important issue then. So that's one of the issues that Collins was really brilliant at, and he had learned his trade in London,
in the post office
in London. Post office as a banker, so he was way around a counting table,
He did. And Philip, very quickly, look, just give people what we're going to talk about next week. We're going to go more about the War of Independence, and then the treaty, which I think divided the country in a way that has never been divided before. And Ronan did hit on it earlier. Before the First World War, the country was heading towards civil war. And I just wondered, did we just kick the can down the road? Because lo and behold, so many years later, we were at civil war with each other over the treaty. But Michael Collins and Dev did say in the fullness of time, Michael Collins will be proved to be a better man than I am. And he was right in a way, wasn't he? And how much of coming forward that people should look forward to this? Because it really is a decisive story, isn't it? The Collins-Dev relationship from fighting shoulder to shoulder to fighting against each other, and how much did it influence, I think, Dev's thinking in later years when he become Taoiseach and when then he become president then of the Irish Republic?
I don't know about that bit, but I mean, the Michael Collins over the next 2.5 years until he was assassinated probably was, I'm thinking maybe up as far as Che Guevara was probably the greatest guy for. What's just the way
Nelson Mandela? Would you call him that?
No. I'm talking about a guy that got rid of had no compunction of getting rid of his enemies. If he thought someone had to go, they went. He was ruthless like that, and that I don't think anybody was at that time. That must have been totally, alien to what people were expecting. But he got his reputation as being the most ruthless is the word I'm looking for. I think De Valera, I think, shafted Collins basically, and it's not been proved that he wasn't behind the actual assassination when it came. But that's all for the next episode, because it's like this is going to be a roller coaster ride through Irish history, and these are the most turbulent 2 years of it, I think, coming up next.
Don't worry, there's more to come in the 80s as well under Charlie Hottie. I mean,
but they weren't shooting people, but maybe they were.
Well, the one thing very quickly, Ronan, just being a journalist, put the journalist's head on now, right? And you look back then, you look at the Charlie Hottie era, and you look at now. How important was journalism all the way through this, all the way reporting of the Easter Rising, the War of Independence, the Civil War, the Free State, Dev coming in, starting his own party? How important was journalism then? And it still is to this day, isn't it? It's your job is so important.
Yeah, well, I would say that, as Benjamin Franklin would say, that a free press is absolutely essential to, or maybe it was Thomas Jefferson, free press is absolutely essential to a working democracy. And if you want to go through the list of what did the Brits ever do for us, well, they gave us a free press. We had a free press in this country. Mostly we had censorship during the First World War, but generally speaking, we had a free press in this country. And it's a vital part of a democracy. You can't really have a democracy without free press. And I think that was very important. It's always been a very important part of accountability in this country.
It is. Well, listen, we're going to leave it there. Thank you all for watching. Part 2 is next week. I could go on for another couple of hours talking about this. I'm loving this. But guys, we will be back next week. Next week, I'll make sure I'll have more diagrams, more information, PDFs coming up to explain to you guys what happened. But yeah, do subscribe to the channel. We are looking to get to 100 subscribers very quickly. We will be going out on the podcast when this is finished. I will be putting this out as a hour each podcast every week. So we will be going live on Spotify as from next week as well. So do join us from there. So you do like it, follow us on all your podcasts where you listen to your podcast. But guys, Ronan, thank you so much indeed. Where can people find you, just very quickly, if people want to hear more of you? Where can they find you?
Just Google my name, you'll find lots of it on there, and buy my book on Sean Lemass.
Yes. Yes, every weekend he's here, but he's a fantastic journalist, a fantastic author as well, and he's knighted by the French president. So there you go. So we've got a sir. And one
other thing, if you want an educational trip, go on one of Ronan's GTI travels. Trips to Flanders and the Somme. It is an incredible journey.
Yeah.
And where can people find you, Philip, apart from the bank, the nightclub, the GPO?
Sorry, let Ronan get back in there.
GTI travel is on in the internet. So I organise trips twice a year. I take people around the Western Front, and I kind of tell the story of the Irish experience in the First World War, from France and Flanders, and link it back to what's happening in Ireland at this time as well. So that's GTI travel, and we do twice a year. There's still a few places left on my October trip, and then I'll have another one in April next year.
Yeah, I've done it. It's well worth it.
Yeah.
Well worth it.
If you can send that to Philip, I'll put the description in the link below for next week. So if you can send Philip that on WhatsApp, I'll make sure the description's put in for you.
Yeah, I have the address. Philip, I have the address done. Yeah. I have it anyway. Yeah.
Philip, where can people find you apart from the GPO, the East Horizon, the War of Independence, probably the Lockout as well? You were there. Where can people find you?
You probably find me in Noah's Ark, the way you're going, I think. I wasn't going back that far. You find me on here, and you might find me in Darky Kelly's in Dublin on a Tuesday night playing drums in the house band. But apart from that, I keep a very quiet life.
Yeah. You're. We all know you are the minister of. We all know you're in the Taoiseach's back pocket. He's in your back pocket. We all know that, Philip.
Hang on, Ronan's just sending a quick message here. That's fine.
But I'm enjoying people, and I hope people enjoy this, because it's something you and me wanted to do for a while, isn't it, Philip? And how important is it that we do get this information out here? Because it is important, isn't it?
It is, because people might hear things, and but to hear it from such an eminent historian as from Ronan's voice, it adds an awful lot of credence to the whole thing, I think, and plus it'll get people interested in Irish history. I know history at school, people think, oh God, not history, but history was my best subject at school.
I love it. I've read books on this as a kid growing up. But listen, you need to go. I need to go.
Yep.
And we will see you next week. Guys, we'll be back. It's 8 o'clock next week. Do join us. Episode 2. Looking forward to it. Thank you all for watching. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.